for questions. Anyone have some questions or comments? Number one question, do we get right? Microphone is here. Where's the microphone? Is the microphone? As to the another task force, which is about the Mississauga Works Task Force, and the comment is the same one. The whole issue of innovation, I have experienced some great tragedies in the telecom industry myself, and I have seen the failure of North America in one sense. There's something good about North America in allowing for individuals to innovate and things like that, but what is very sadly lacking in North America is the complementary role of the public sector in laying out the policies to ensure that the innovations that are done really fulfill public interest or aligned with public interest, not just for profit making in the private sector. And that is really the root of the tragedy behind a company like Nortel in Canada, and also a company like Lucent and Bell Labs in the US. And I have, both of them are my former employers. And recently we're seeing the tragedy now. We hope that RIM can still find its way and continue, but even RIM is struggling recently, and I'm glad that Professor Wolf, I think, mentioned both of those earlier. And I have a lot to say from my personal experience on that. But my point is, North America needs to wake up, understand the role of the public sector in laying out the public policies before just allowing people to go on with innovation privately. Thank you.
I can try to respond and indicate that perhaps your message, I also heard, at least in my ears, from Mayor Densky. Mayor of Calgary was also talking about breaking down the barriers, dealing with the issues of how policies right now are blocking opportunities for innovation. And I think that's your message, and I agree with you completely. Having had my own experience in being one of the people that developed the program for newcomers, trying to train newcomers with advanced degrees and trying to deal with them entering our society, at least I've had some frontline experience to understand some of the frustrations that individuals do face. I'll also share that, as you probably know from my name, while I grew up in Canada, my parents didn't. And so the situation has not changed dramatically over the years in terms of how policies and procedures can stymie individuals that are highly creative.
But if I could, I think that the point as well of the whole post-secondary task force is exactly what your point is breaking down those barriers between public institutions and private sectors, and trying to get rid of the silos and connect the silos. So I think that I think that's what they were recommending. Greg?
Hi, thank you. I actually live in Ward 5, which has a new city councillor named Crombie, I think. And Ward 5 is a very interesting place because we have Malton, which is where new Canadians come and they land in Malton, and the unemployment rate amongst youth is 50%, and the unemployment rate amongst educated people from other countries is 35% because we don't give them degrees. And then they move from Malton over to Britannia, where I live. And that's the dream. You come to Canada, your kids get to move into the nice area because you don't. And it's all about innovation. And I think this is amazing that here in Canada and here in Mississauga, we're starting to get this. In Japan, 50% of all expenditures in R&D and product development are made by the government in cooperation with industry. And yet in North America, the great inventors leave university in first year, go out in the marketplace, and build a company. So there's 2 points I want to make about this. First, I understand that 2/3 of the population will have university degrees and you'll need them to get a job. But the fact of the matter is there's 1/3 of us that don't have university degrees, who are small businessmen and entrepreneurs who can't afford to go to university, and we're out in the marketplace working and innovating and creating products and ideas which we can't finance in Canada, so we sell to Americans. So innovation is not just about intellectuals, or as a certain conservative professor said, I'd rather be governed by the first 1,000 people in the phone book than the faculty of Harvard. So I think what I'm trying to say is, I think we might want to open the focus up more to not just post-secondary education, not just training, but taking these great, wonderful, beautiful ideas that come up from young people who get crushed by the education and the entrepreneurial system and give up. And maybe we should look at the people that we've left out. That's my comment.
I think it's a very valuable comment. I think Brian was talking about, did we get it right? Are there other topic areas that we need to focus on? And I would put that into that bin. It's an important topic area.
Yeah, my name is Steve Ferguson. I was on this task force for a short period of time and had the opportunity to sit in on some of Professor Wolf's innovation research network studies. And I had the opportunity through that to see a lot of differing accelerators that were used in different cities. And what struck me, going back to one of the comments that Professor Wolf made here again tonight, that there's no absolute blueprint in this process, but what you could see different approaches used. In Ottawa, you could see one approach used where one group took the lead. In Hamilton and in Toronto, where universities took the lead. In Ottawa, it was more government-led. And then the obvious example we talked about tonight is in Waterloo, where business led the process. And that's not to be exclusionary, recognizing that collaboration across all the major stakeholders is essential, and we've said that many times tonight and previously. But I wondered, in what you're proposing here, is there one group that is taking the lead, or how is that structured? Thank you.
So to answer your question right now, the educational institutions are probably what one would see as taking the lead. This is not something that, in a sense, is a lead other than to point this particular task force in a direction. And so it's not that the post-secondary educational institutions intend on leading the innovation agenda. What is intended is that the institutions will become that bridge for those who do lead the agenda as a pipeline into the community and for delivery of whatever programming they can deliver. So in a sense, let me throw this back, not at yourself, but at the audience here. What is required are individuals to step forward and identify as those that are able and are interested to lead an innovation agenda, and do it from the standpoint of thinking about problems such as been put forward. How do we break down the barriers that exist? Is there a way of actually accommodating individuals that are not necessarily in the post-secondary educational system? But what we're looking for are the leaders to actually make that happen. So I'll leave that as a challenge for the group overall.
Hello, my name is Ulli. When I was going over your slides, the one thing that caught my attention was there wasn't any focus on funding, right? Like funding to a post-secondary education system. The gentleman back there talked about how some students feel let down by the education system, and that's because they can't afford it, right? Like when you're forced to not continue with your graduate studies because you have to pay back your debt, right? That's a hindrance to innovation. And that sets back not just the city, but the entire country back, right? So if we're going to be making those investments in the first place, let's make them sincerely and make sure that the students that are eligible to get into university and college are able to pursue other programs without the fear of debt. And the statistics are out there. Like more of our colleges and our universities are getting funded through tuition fees and non-government funding. In fact, for the first time, U of T, more than 50% of the operating budget of the University of Toronto is not funded through government funding. And that's something scary. That's a trend that our parents and grandparents have never had to deal with. So my question is, why wasn't there any focus on that? And the second point is with regards to the relationship between private industry and our educational institutions. I am sometimes worried with a focus or fascination on corporatization of our education system. And that is, I want our faculty and I want our students to think beyond just making products that provide profit. There's so many sources of innovation and creativity that come out of different programs, right? So they should, I don't know what thought was put into that. Like, should we review or revision our educational system that's just focused on skills, or more to do with fostering just innovation for certain industries in the city or in the community?
All right, so let me take them in two parts. The first was the question about funding. And you'll notice in the slide deck there's nothing about funding in terms of the various organizations, in terms of how to actually fund the MILA organization, this type of thing. That does exist, and it does not deal with what you're suggesting. In fact, what you're suggesting is the type of problem that the group called MILA would have to tackle. What we're looking for is a group of very senior people who will wrap their head around this, have the connectivity to actually take this forward at different levels of government and into the community, industry, social service agencies to actually address that kind of problem. You're talking about process and policy, and it needs to be changed. And as we heard from the Mayor of Calgary, having influential people standing next to you makes all the difference in terms of creating value proposition for that type of change. That's what MILA is intended to do, right? The second part of this, the situation, what was the second part? Sorry. Funding. No, funding we did. Oh, the corporatization, sorry. The intention here, I think because of the brevity of the slides also, it's elements that you'll not pick up that have been talked about extensively in the task force. And the element that I'll emphasize to you is that innovation in too many ways is thought of as commercialization, as a business prospect. And this is why I wanted to leave in the early slides in my statement that innovation is simply the movement of that creative idea into something that's positive practice. One can innovate in policy. What you've just talked about in terms of the tuition structure can have a significant impact in terms of uptake of students moving through the educational system and change lives. Well, that would be a very influential, positive change in innovation in terms of policy development. It has nothing to do with commercialization. It has a huge impact in the overall well-being of the community. That's what we're actually suggesting in terms of what we would like students to be able to learn. It's not innovating for commercialization. It's not an entrepreneurial slant that we're trying to suggest. Some students may opt for that. There will also be some students that don't want this particular type of education at all, a much more traditional educational experience. This will not be forced on anyone. The point I'm making is that we want to now look within the post-secondary educational system and ask what can we add that students may want and really will make a difference for them in their lives. It's up to the students then to help guide that and decide whether they want to take it.